Hi and welcome back grade 7 to your second prep cook. We cooked sausage rolls last week and this week we're cooking choc coconut slice. Okay, health and safety, my hair is up, jewellery is off, I've washed my hands really well, I'm not wearing shoes, but at school you would be expected to wear your closed leather shoes. Okay, let's have a look at how we're organising ourselves today. So I've got two parts to this cook. We've got the actual slice and I've got the icing to go on the slice. So I'm going to cook those two separately, okay? My mise en place, okay, which remember is the preparation you're doing in advance. I've put on my oven to preheat for about 200 degrees is fine. 180 on some ovens if your oven's quite hot, but just kind of keep in mind you need to watch it for either 180 or 200 degrees. I've melted some butter, 150 grams of butter. I have melted. I'll talk to you about how you can measure that butter soon, but I've done that in advance. That's my mise en place going in my mise en place column in my work plan. I've cut up some greaseproof paper. That's also some mise en place. I have also done quite a lot of measuring of ingredients. Now this recipe has a lot more ingredients, so I've measured all of those in advance and I'll go through them all in a second. Now this has all been done in advance, so I'm not rushing around the kitchen, grabbing packets, mess everywhere. Okay, this I would highly encourage you to do. It means a much more successful cook because they're all here and they're all organised. So all of that goes in your mise en place column. Okay, now let's talk about equipment. That goes in your equipment column. For your slice, okay, not the icing, we're talking about that later. For your slice, you need a slice tray. So my slice tray is about the same size as a planner or a diary. It's got higher size than our sausage roll pan had last week because it's going to obviously need to rise a little bit. You don't want to use a really big tray, otherwise your slice will end up being a biscuit. Okay, you want it to be somewhat small, okay? You could have a square, you could have a round, a cake pan would be fine. Okay, so it looks about that size, about the size of your planner. I've also got, as I said before, some greaseproof paper, that's equipment. I've got a little bowl to crack my egg into. I've got a big bowl for my actual slice. I've got a wooden spoon or something like any normal spoon. A spoon you'd eat your breakfast with would be fine. And I've got some cup measurements and some teaspoon measurements. I've got a 1 cup, a half a cup, a 1/3 cup, and a 1/4 cup measurement. And I've got a tablespoon and a teaspoon measure. And I have used all of these to measure all of my ingredients in advance. I'm not going to use them again because obviously I've measured, but this is what I did use to measure these ingredients prior to starting my cook today. So that's the equipment you would need for your slice, okay? So that goes in your equipment column. Let's talk about ingredients you'll need, and these go into the ingredients and the amount column on your work plan. 150 grams of butter that I've melted in advance. So when you get your butter, I don't know where I put my butter, here it is over here. Whichever butter you choose, this one's just a normal cooking butter, it will have little increments on the side, little measurements on the side. We need 150 grams, so I would go 50, 100, 150, and I would chop it off at the 150 mark. Now, you might not use this butter, you might use margarine or you might use olive oil spread if you're dairy free, and then you'd have to measure it out a little bit differently. But usually if you're using the stick butter, which is really cheap, you would use little increments on the side to measure 150 grams, and I've melted that in advance. Just remember, if you are using the microwave to melt, which is the easiest way, you can't use metal, you must use a plastic microwave safe container. You could melt that on the stovetop, just a little bit less safe than the microwave. So that's 150 grams of melted butter. I've got 1 egg. I've got a teaspoon of vanilla. Any vanilla is fine, get the cheap one, the extract, whatever's in your cupboard's fine. You could leave it out if you don't have any at home and your parents don't want to get any, but it does add a little bit more flavour. So a teaspoon of that. I'll show you how to measure that soon. I've got 1 cup of brown sugar. Brown sugar is much more sweet, it's much more moist than normal sugar. You could just swap it out for white sugar, but this gives your slice a really nice fudgy consistency, almost like a brownie. It's not raw sugar or coffee sugar, which kind of looks like brown white sugar, like big crystals. Make sure you're using brown sugar. It's very sticky, okay, and this is going to give your slice a really nice flavour as well. It's less processed as well, it's better for your body. So 1 cup of that. When you're measuring it with your cup measurement, make sure it's firmly packed, which means you're really pushing down on that measurement to make sure you get the full 1 cup amount. We've got half a cup of plain flour, and we've got 1/3 of a cup of self-raising flour. The difference being that self-raising makes things rise, plain flour doesn't. It's got an added ingredient, which is baking powder in there. You just buy it like that. So I'm only putting a little bit of self-raising, so 1/3 of a cup of self-raising, 1/2 a cup of plain, because I don't want it to really rise very much, okay? So I've pre-measured those out. I've got 3/4 of a cup of coconut, desiccated coconut, really finely ground coconut. You could use shredded coconut, it would just be more coarse. So 3/4 of a cup of that. You can measure that out just by eyeballing it on a cup measurement, or you can use the 1/2 and the 1/4 cup. 1/2 and a 1/4, if you know your maths, is 3/4 of a cup. We're using 1/4 of a cup of cocoa. Cocoa is not drinking chocolate, it's not Milo, it's not quick, it's not sweet, okay? It's quite bitter, it gives a really strong chocolate flavour. You'll also need a little bit more cocoa later on in your icing, but we're just looking at the slice for now, okay? So let's quickly recap. 150 grams of melted butter, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 egg, a cup of brown sugar, 1/2 a cup plain flour, 1/3 of a cup of self-raising flour. Could use wholemeal if you want to be a little bit healthier on those. 3/4 of a cup of desiccated coconut, and 1/4 of a cup of cocoa. Now this is a great recipe. It's called a melt and mix, which means I've melted something and then I'm just going to mix it all together. Okay, and that's exactly what we're doing now. It doesn't matter what order this goes in, it just all goes in the bowl, gets mixed together. So I'm chucking in my brown sugar, chucking in my flours, I've got my plain, and I've got my self-raising, all in one big bowl. I've got my desiccated coconut. Doesn't matter what order, I could put these in any order. Got my 1/4 cup of cocoa. Okay, I'm going to actually use the lid of my vanilla because they were clever and they made the lids 1 teaspoon. You could use your teaspoon measure if you wanted, but I'm just using my lid. Remember, any vanilla is fine. In that goes 1 teaspoon's worth of vanilla. I'm going to put my egg in now. So I'm going to crack my egg into the little separate egg bowl. And that is for 2 reasons. Is to check for any eggshell that's possibly in there, and also to check if it's rotten. You don't want to ruin your ingredients by putting rotten egg in there. Rotten egg you can't eat. It smells terrible. You'll know if it's rotten. Okay, so I'm making sure that that egg doesn't have any eggshell. It's not rotten. It's good to go. I don't even have to whisk that with a fork. I'm just going to chuck it right on in with my other ingredients. Now, what you do need to be mindful of is that hot butter and egg will make scrambled egg. So if you've just melted that just a second ago, that's going to cook your egg. So don't have them in direct contact with one another. My butter was done about half an hour ago, so it's really just room temp. It's not going to cook anything, so I can just whack that in. But if you've just melted your butter, I would mix it through first before adding my egg, or mix my egg in and then add the melted butter. So it's not in direct contact, and that flour and all the other dry ingredients is going to cool off the butter and stop it cooking your egg. Okay, so I've literally got all my dry ingredients, my vanilla, my egg, my melted butter, and now I'm just going to mix. Okay, melt and mix. It's really easy. Now just quickly, keep in mind with baking, not cooking, baking. We cooked last week. Cooking is like cooking a meal, a main meal. Baking is cooking biscuits and cakes and slices. Baking is like science, it's a chemistry. So in a science experiment, if I was to change something in the experiment, it would change the end product. If I'm going to change one of my variables, it's going to change the end product of my experiment. And it's the same with baking. If you change one of these ingredients to a different ingredient, if you change the quantity of one of these ingredients to a different quantity, it's going to change the end product. It won't always be bad, okay, but it will be different. So just keep in mind that you want to try and keep the ingredients the same, if you can, and you want to keep the quantities the same. Otherwise, it may be a bit tricky to fix it, or it might look different at the end. If you want to use gluten-free products, you can. Dairy-free products, you can. Vegan products, halal products, you can. People are sometimes allergic to egg, and then they would know what to use instead of egg. But you can use other ingredients, but just be willing to kind of be a little bit flexible on what the end product looks like. Because just like science, it will change the end product. Okay, so I've mixed all of those together. It's not dry, but it's also not a liquid. Okay, so it's kind of all come together. There's no flour in the bottom. It's all kind of come together into one batter, really thick batter. Now I'm going to get my tray. I'm going to use some spray oil. You don't have to do this. You could use the wrapper from the butter, or you could just not use it. But what it does is it makes my grease-proof stick to my tray. And just means that my tray, just means that my grease-proof doesn't slip off my tray. I'm just going to push that in. Okay, just like that. You can see how it's stuck in there with the grease proof. And then I'm going to get my slice and I'm going to pour that mixture in. And then using my wooden spoon, I'm just going to push it down into my pan so it kind of covers the entire base evenly, flattening it out as much as I can. And remember, I've preheated my oven 180, 200 degrees, and it's going to take about 20 minutes to cook. And when it's cooking, you're going to move on to the icing. Pushing that around. I do want you to put a timer on, and the timer means that you're not going to be having to stress about remembering when it went in. And also, because you're busy making your icing, you don't have to think about the time. So it's kind of letting some sort of a timer on your phone or on the oven or the microwave think for you. Okay, so I'm just flattening out the top. You want it to be as even as possible, so your slice is nice and even and no one gets the really thick bits and someone else gets the little bits. It also means it cooks a lot more evenly. Okay. Awesome, that looks really good. Okay, so it's nice and even, flat, and it's going to go into the oven, 200, 180 degrees for about 20 minutes. Okay. All right, on to our icing. Just going to move these things away. Okay, for our icing, let's talk about equipment. So you will need a bowl, some sort of a spoon. I'm just using some little white spoon I found in the drawer. You'll also obviously need your ingredients. So this equipment also needs to go on your equipment column in your work plan, and these ingredients need to go on the ingredients column on your work plan. So ingredients, we have 1.5 cups of icing sugar. I've just used icing mixture, not pure icing sugar, because it just doesn't, it's not as kind of thick, okay? It's kind of a little bit more usable and manageable and it doesn't stick together as much. So 1.5 cups of icing sugar mixture. In it goes. And again, I've pre-measured these in advance. I've done my mise en place, so I'm not having to stress and worry. Into there, 1/4 cup of cocoa. This is another 1/4 cup of cocoa. So all up, we need 1/2 cup of cocoa, but we're splitting it into 2 over the slice and over the icing. So 1/4 cup of cocoa. I'm putting some topping on that, on top of my icing as a decoration. So that's actually not going to go into my actual icing. So that's going to the side. So I've got about a tablespoon of butter. You don't have to be as precise. About 25, 30 grams of butter. This is a little bit more than that. I kind of like my butter in my icing. So about a tablespoon or about 25, 30 grams of butter into your icing. Now notice I haven't melted that. That's going in hard. Okay, you're wanting it to go in hard. It's going to make a nice creamy icing. Don't melt it. Okay, so I've got icing sugar, cocoa and hard butter, about a tablespoon of butter in on top there. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to put my kettle on. Okay, so I'm going to boil my kettle, which should only take a few seconds. Now my icing is going to be the consistency of Nutella or peanut butter when it's finished. It's going to be nice and thick and fudgy. I don't want it to be a liquid. Okay, it shouldn't end up being a liquid. I want it to be a fudgy kind of peanut butter and Nutella-y consistency. So my one tip with your icing is don't put too much water in. Be very, very careful about how much water you're putting in. I think on the recipe it says 2 tablespoons, but I wouldn't go and whack in 2 tablespoons straight away. Because sometimes you need 2 tablespoons, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you need a little bit more. So we're just going to see. But what I am going to do is I'm going to measure out 2 tablespoons and just put them in my cup measure here, just because it's here. You could use a cup or a mug or a small bowl. And I'm just going to be very careful about how much water I'm putting in. Little bit mix, little bit mix, little bit mix. And I'm going to be very careful not chucking it all in. Okay, that's very, very, very important. All right, my kettle is just about to boil. Be careful, it obviously is boiling water, it could burn you. Okay, and I'm going to actually pour that boiling water directly onto my butter. What that's going to do is going to help that butter soften, and then I'm going to use my elbow grease and my arm to mix all of our icing together. And that our butter will actually melt into the icing, but we're not melting the butter in advance in the microwave. Okay, very important. Okay, so 2 tablespoons of boiling hot water. If your parents aren't too keen on you using boiling water, at school we just use the hot water from the taps and it seems to work fine. So I'm going to just put a little tiny bit, not the whole lot, just a little tiny bit, and then I'm just going to mix it around. A little tiny bit more. Notice I'm not pouring the whole amount in. And I'm kind of using the back of my spoon, and this is a not very cooking term, to smoosh my butter into my icing sugar and into my cocoa, kind of pushing it in. And that hot water has helped me do that, soften that butter a little bit. Also leaving the butter out of the fridge will soften it a little bit as well, which will help. So you can see at the moment I'm kind of just trying to get that butter mixed in a little bit. And then I'm going to add a tiny bit more water, not the whole lot. I'm thinking that 2 tablespoons is going to be perfect this time around, but next time around I might need more, it might need less. So you really have to eyeball it each time you make the icing, and don't just chuck the water in. At school, some people are so busy just trying to get everything done, so we're nearly there, that they just whack a whole heap of water in and think that's going to kind of make it go quicker, and all it does is just ruin their icing. They can't save it. Okay, so you see how we're almost there. We've just got a little bit of the icing to mix in. I'm not going to add any more water now. Okay, I'm just going to use my elbow grips in my arm to mix the rest of those dry ingredients in. If there's any little bits of butter in there, I'm going to make sure they get mixed in, because you don't want lumps of butter in your icing. And I actually didn't use the whole 2 tablespoons. I probably still have half a tablespoon left in my container there. So that's just to show you that you don't need the full 2 tablespoons. And I really didn't put very much water in, and I was very careful about how much water to put in. Go slowly. You don't need much water. Okay, so you can see very much like Nutella. Okay, Nutella peanut butter consistency. Okay, you're lucky, and I actually made a slice earlier. So I'm just going to grab it, and this came out of the oven about 10 minutes ago, so it's still quite warm. Okay, and while it's still warm is the perfect time to ice it, because the actual warmth of the slice is going to help that icing kind of move around easily on your slice. So we're going to pop that icing on. And I'm sure you might have a little brother or sister who might like to lick the spoon or lick the bowl. We wouldn't obviously be doing that at home because, doing that at school, because it's not very hygienic. But at home, these are the things we can do, and that's what makes our home kitchens different than our school or commercial kitchens. Okay, so I've scraped that out as much as possible. I'm just going to use my spoon now just to move that icing around. I would probably leave my slice for about 10 minutes before I ice it. I still want a bit of heat in there, which is going to help me move that icing around. Okay, just getting that, and you're spreading it all around, trying to get a nice even layer. Okay, and then on top of that, you can decorate it with whatever you like. It is a Choc coconut slice, so I've got some more coconuts, and shredded coconut this time, which is a bit coarser than desiccated. And I'm going to sprinkle that on top, but you could do mini M&Ms, you could do sprinkles, hundreds and thousands, you could do some crushed up biscuit, whatever you've got in the cupboard. You could just leave it plain. You could do chopped chips, whatever you want to be creative, go your hardest. Just going to get some of my shredded coconut. Just going to decorate that. And that's ready to eat straight away. And it's also will keep for about 3 days. I don't think it will last that long. It never lasts that long in my house. But it will keep for about 3 days. You can keep it on the bench. Now it's a bit cooler, or you can put it in the fridge. You can also freeze that really well as well. That will freeze and defrost really well as well. So, wash my hands quickly. That is our Choc coconut slice. Remember, it takes about 20 minutes in the oven, but I really want you to check it. Keep an eye on it. You'll know it's cooked when it's kind of firm to the touch. There's no liquid left in the middle. The edges will be a little bit darker. It'll look kind of cooked. It won't be any liquid kind of anywhere in the middle. When you touch it, it will be firm and it'll kind of slightly rise up as well. And take it out, leave it 10 minutes, then ice it. My key points to remember are definitely preheat your oven. Start kind of 10 minutes before you're ready. Definitely measure out all those ingredients. So important for Mise en Place to be ready and prepared. So keep all those ingredients kind of in little bowls, ready, measured out in advance, ready to go. And with the icing, make sure we're only adding a tiny bit of water at a time. So it's going to be really easy to get that good consistency like Nutella or peanut butter and not like a liquid. The other thing to remember is that don't put hot butter in with your egg when you're mixing up your slice because it will cook the egg. So either put them in once the butter's cooled or put them in separately into the bowl. Okay, hope you have fun. Can't wait to see your chopped coconut slice pictures coming through. Can't wait to see some more people sending their sausage roll recipe pictures through. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks, guys.